The moment I stepped into the Mason and Company office, it hit meath smell. A sharp blend of luxury disinfectant, espresso beans probably imported from Italy, and ambition. The kind of ambition that lingers in the air long after the people are gone. The marble floor beneath my boots echoed with each step, like the building itself wanted to remind me I didn't belong here anymore. It was colder than I remembered. Glass, steel, and silence, the holy trinity of corporate kingdoms built by men who never wiped their own tears, let alone their desks. I hadn't been here since I was 12. Back then, my father stood tall behind that same mahogany table, ruffling my hair and telling his colleagues, "She's got ideas, big ones." He meant it. For about 5 minutes, and now that table belonged to my brother Brad. Same polished smile, same tailored suit, but no warmth behind the eyes. Sitting there like a king who never earned his crown. Beside him, Victoria, his wife, and, unofficially, the one pulling the strings adjusted his collar like she was preparing a doll for display. Her perfume filled the space between us, sweet and venomous. She looked up at me and smirked. "Emma," she said, all sugar and knives, "we almost thought you wouldn't show." I nodded, but my throat tightened. I wasn't sure if it was anger, grief, or the scent of betrayal lingering in the conference room. Everything about this place whispered that it wasn't mine. Not the chairs, not the air, not even the damn view of the skyline. And yet, something inside me refused to shrink. I didn't come here to fight for a seat at the table. I came to burn the table down. I watched the lawyer's fingers tap across a stack of ivory-colored documents, his gold wedding band catching the afternoon light like it had something to say. "Mr. Whitmore had been with our family since before I was born. Gray suit, colder smile." The room on the 42nd floor was silent, insulated by money and secrets, but my heart thudded loud enough to echo in my own ears. I sat across from Brad, my brother, who looked every inch the heir. Crisp cuffs, confident posture, and a face that always stayed blank when it mattered most. Victoria sat beside him like a throne made of porcelain and poison, her manicured fingers laced calmly in her lap. She wasn't family by blood, but somehow, she was the one steering this entire empire and she knew it. When Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat and began reading the will, my stomach turned. "To my son, Brad Mason." The list was endless. Real estate holdings, stock portfolios, patents, even the house in Miami where I'd been living for the past 3 years. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just listened as the man who once taught me how to ride a bike handed everything to the boy who used to push me off it. "And to my daughter, Emma Mason," Whitmore said, his voice dipping almost apologetically, "I leave the food truck, Nana's Kitchen, Registry 1987, currently located in Brooklyn." There was a pause. The kind of pause that breaks bones without sound. Brad didn't look at me. He just crossed one leg over the other and stared at the ceiling like the whole thing bored him. Victoria, on the other hand, placed a hand on her chest and smiled like a villain in a bedtime story. "How sweet," she whispered. "We know how much you love cooking for the less fortunate." I remembered suggesting a plant-based menu for the Masons' flagship steakhouse once. Brad laughed like I'd told a joke. My father had said, "Restaurants are serious business, sweetheart. The kitchen's a man's world." And Victoria, then just an intern in a pink blazer, too big for her shoulders, wrote it down in a little notebook like it was prophecy. Years later, she pitched the exact idea as her own, rebranded as a visionary twist on tradition, and they applauded. I left the building numb, my palms sweating despite the icy grip of the air conditioning. Every corner of that place felt rigged like I'd just stepped into a game where the rules were rewritten behind my back. At the bank, I expected more of the same. But then the manager, a silver-haired gentleman with gentle eyes, called me into his office. "Your great-grandmother Rosa left something here for you," he said, pulling out a dusty metal box from the back of a drawer. They told me to throw it out, said it was nothing. But I knew better. Your Nana had a fire in her I never forgot. Inside the box was her handwritten recipe journaling faded, pages stained with oil and time. Tucked inside was a note in delicate cursive. "Emma, one day you'll understand. Family business isn't about money. It's about who owns the story. And mine lives here." I felt something crack open in my chest. Love, rage, both. There were also contracts originals from the 1980s, proving that the recipes Mason and Company had trademarked as family originals were actually Nana Rosa's. Photographs showed her cooking side by side with culinary legends like Julia Child and James Beard. Another folder held a report with Victoria's name on it. Evidence she'd attempted to secretly sell the Mason brand to a Chinese conglomerate 6 months ago. I drove to Brooklyn in silence, the box resting on the passenger seat like a co-pilot on a mission. When I arrived at the old food truck, it was worse than I'd imagined. Rusted, abandoned, infested. A graffiti tag read "Closed for Good," but I wasn't sure if it referred to the truck or the dream attached to it. Still, I opened the back and climbed in. Under the grill, hidden in the compartment Nana had once shown me when I was a curious 8-year-old girl learning how to crack eggs with one hand, I found more than just dust. There were original contracts with her signature, blueprint sketches of a restaurant she never got to build, a cassette tape labeled, "Brad doesn't know this exists." I smiled through tears. I called Diego. Diego had been the head chef at Mason's before Victoria fired him for being too bold, which we both knew was code for too brown. He picked up on the second ring. "Emma, haven't heard that voice in a while." "I need your help," I said. "I want to build something. From scratch? From truth? Are you in?" His silence was short. I was waiting for this day. That night, we sat in the gutted food truck, the smell of mold and lost dreams surrounding us. I showed him Nana's journal, flipping through pages filled with scribbled notes and sauce stains. "This isn't just food, Diego. It's legacy. It's proof. And it's ours." He looked at me with the kind of reverence most people reserved for scriptures. "Then let's make them eat their lies." I stared at the skyline from the truck's tiny window. The same city that had watched them take everything from me would soon watch me take it all back. Not out of revenge, not just revenge, but because the story of our family had been hijacked. And it was time to write a new one where the kitchen belonged to those who earned it, not inherited it. And so, over stale coffee and broken dreams, the first draft of the revolution was born in a napkin, under a flickering streetlight, in the heart of Brooklyn. I never thought peeling layers of old grease off a food truck ceiling would feel like a spiritual awakening. But there I was, elbow deep in grime, hands blistered and heart strangely full. Diego stood on a rusted ladder, holding a busted ventilation fan like it was a puzzle from another century. "This thing hasn't seen love since Reagan," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. The Brooklyn heat had no mercy, and neither did time. Every pipe we touched hissed like it was protesting the comeback, but we didn't stop. We patched leaks, rewired the entire power system, scraped off years of neglect with steel brushes and caffeine-fueled stubbornness. Diego made jokes, bad ones mostly, about us being culinary archaeologists. I laughed because it helped me breathe. Somewhere between the broken fryer and the leaky propane line, we became more than teammates. We became survivors with matching scars. He told me about growing up in Queens, how his mother made tamales every Sunday no matter how tired she was, and how food had always been his language of healing. I shared stories about Nana, how she'd sing while stirring sauce, how her hands always smelled like basil and garlic. The deeper we dug into the truck, the more we uncovered parts of ourselves we'd buried years ago. The first time we fired up the grill again, something shifted. The smell of burnt onions and olive oil filled the air, not perfect, but alive. We sat on milk crates in the back alley, sketching menu ideas on old pizza boxes. What if we made the Millionaire a vegan but kept Nana's spice profile? I asked. Diego grinned. What if we brought back the truffle gnocchi but did it with sweet potato instead of Yukon Gold? We started experimenting. Some dishes were disaster-zone risotto literally caught fire, but others sparked something real. The more we cooked, the more it felt like we were building something that couldn't be stolen. And then came the city permits. God. The health inspection forms were a Kafkaesque nightmare. The guy at the zoning office acted like we were trying to build a nightclub in a church. You need 3 separate sinks for meat, veg, and utensils, he barked, flipping through our application with the care of someone swatting flies. We smiled, nodded, refiled everything. 3 times. We were delayed 2 weeks because of a broken window that didn't even open. At night, I'd sit in the truck with a flashlight and Nana's recipe book on my lap, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But then, opening night. We picked East Village strategically chaotic, just the right level of foot traffic, and filled with foodies desperate for something authentic. The line started with 6 people. A blogger, 2 lost tourists, 1 woman who'd followed our TikTok account after I posted a teaser of Diego flambeing mushrooms. The first bite went to a guy named Marcus, a self-proclaimed sauce connoisseur. He didn't say a word, just nodded, eyes wide. He posted a 60-second video that night. Bro, this food truck? Better than Mason's, dead serious. The clip blew up. 100,000 views overnight. Then 500. Then 1 million. By the end of the week, we had a crowd so thick I had to hire 2 cousins just to take orders. Instagram stories flooded in. TikTok reactions. One girl cried eating our Nonna Rosa ravioli. A food critic from a niche blog called it a resurrection of culinary integrity. Diego cried too, but he blamed the onions. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. She sent a health inspector within days, clipboard in hand, and a grin that said, "I'm here to ruin your day." But I'd anticipated her move. I pulled out a printed copy of the anonymous complaint, complete with the IP address traced back to Mason and Company's Midtown office. The inspector blinked. Well, I guess I'll just check the fire extinguisher then. He left empty-handed, and across the street, I caught a glimpse of Victoria in the back of a black SUV. Jaw clenched like she'd bitten into a lemon. She escalated fast. Legal threats, trademark claims, a cease and desist letter citing unauthorized use of proprietary recipes. I smiled when I read it. Because I had a trump card in old VHS transfer video from 1983 showing my grandfather signing over exclusive ownership of the recipes to Nana Rosa. I uploaded it to LinkedIn with the caption, "Funny how the real chefs never needed lawyers." Within hours, the video trended. Culinary historians started sharing it. So did feminist blogs calling Nana a pioneer erased by patriarchy. Brad finally showed his face and ought to apologize, of course, but to save his own skin. He invited me to a civil discussion with Mason and Company shareholders. I walked into the conference room wearing my Nana's kitchen apron, flour still on my cheek. The table was filled with men in ties and expressions of strategic concern. Victoria sat at the end, looking like she wanted to throw her coffee mug through my skull. "We're concerned about brand confusion," one shareholder said. I smiled. "I'm concerned about theft, misattribution, and legacy." I laid out the contracts, the video, the press clippings, the viral posts. I told them about the investors contacting me, the expansion offers, the wait lists. I could see some of them shifting in their seats. Numbers speak louder than bloodlines. When I mentioned Victoria's attempted sale of Mason and Company to a conglomeratone she hadn't disclosed, they froze. Then one of them asked quietly, "Do you have proof?" I didn't need to answer. Brad did it for me. He stood up and muttered, "She tried to sell us out. Emma's telling the truth." Victoria's face twisted, but the room wasn't with her anymore. I had taken their respect, one plate at a time. That night, Diego and I stood outside the food truck, watching the line of customers stretch into the dark. He handed me a cannoli. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "We're just getting started." Because this wasn't just about food or revenge or even legacy. This was about rewriting the story. And for the first time in my life, I was holding the pen. I opened the doors of the first brick-and-mortar Nana's Table just 3 blocks from Mason's flagship restaurant, and as the smell of garlic confit and rosemary focaccia filled the air, I knew we'd already won. The walls were painted in soft earth tones, the lighting warm like a grandmother's hug, and every table carried a handwritten quote from Nana Rosa's recipe journal. We didn't just serve food, we told a story with every plate. When the first customer cried after tasting our porcini tagliatelle, I felt a part of my lineage resurrect itself right there, spoon by spoon. The second restaurant opened 6 months later in Harlemby design. I wanted to hire people Masons never would. Our line cooks were immigrants, our pastry chef was trans, our manager, a former dishwasher, denied a promotion for years. They brought flavors from their childhoods, strength from their battles, and pride from finally being seen. At every location I posted a plaque. This kitchen runs on love, not legacy. People resonated with that. Critics raved. Investors called daily. But I turned most of them down. This wasn't about cashing out. This was about proving something sacred can't be franchised, only honored. Then came the offer from Taste Corp, the restaurant world's grim reaper. They'd buy legacy brands, squeeze them dry, then toss the bones. Their interest meant one thing. We'd become a threat. But I wasn't flattered. I was furious. That same week, I received an anonymous email. No text, just an audio file attached. I pressed play. Victoria's voice, crisp and calculated. "We can offload Mason and Company for $15 million if we bury the debt. Brad won't know. Emma won't matter." My blood ran cold. It wasn't business anymore. It was war. I called Diego and Ava, our new CFO and a former Mason intern Victoria fired for being too outspoken. We gathered in the back office of the Queens location and played the audio 3 times, each one stinging more than the last. "This is it," I said. "We burn the last bridge tonight." The annual Mason and Company shareholder meeting was held in their gilded midtown ballroom, cold chandeliers, colder champagne. I walked in wearing Nana's brooch and my staff uniform. Brad spotted me first. He didn't look angry, just tired, like a man finally realizing the price of being silent for too long. When the board tried to start the meeting, I stood and asked to present financials. They laughed. Until Ava dimmed the lights and projected the numbers. Nana's Table, 5 locations, valuation $50 million, annual growth 200%, waitlist of over 30 investors. Murmurs erupted. Then came the bombshell, Mason and Company, $12 million in debt, revenue decline of 30% per quarter. I turned to Brad, who stood slowly and dropped his gaze to the floor. "She tried to sell the company behind our backs," he said. "This is her voice." He hit play. The room went dead silent. Victoria jumped to her feet, demanding the playback stop, claiming defamation, but the damage was irreversible. "You lied to us," one shareholder snapped. "You sabotaged your own company," said another. She pleaded, then threatened. None of it worked. For the first time, the room listened to me. And so, Over stale coffee and broken dreams, the first draft of the revolution was born in a napkin, under a flickering streetlight, in the heart of Brooklyn. I never thought peeling layers of old grease off a food truck ceiling would feel like a spiritual awakening. But there I was elbow deep in grime, hands blistered and heart strangely full. Diego stood on a rusted ladder, holding a busted ventilation fan like it was a puzzle from another century. "This thing hasn't seen love since Reagan," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. The Brooklyn heat had no mercy, and neither did time. Every pipe we touched hissed like it was protesting the comeback, but we didn't stop. We patched leaks, rewired the entire power system, scraped off years of neglect with steel brushes and caffeine-fueled stubbornness. Diego made jokes, bad ones mostly, about us being culinary archaeologists. I laughed because it helped me breathe. Somewhere between the broken fryer and the leaky propane line, we became more than teammates, we became survivors with matching scars. He told me about growing up in Queens, how his mother made tamales every Sunday no matter how tired she was, and how food had always been his language of healing. I shared stories about Nana, how she'd sing while stirring sauce, how her hands always smelled like basil and garlic. The deeper we dug into the truck, the more we uncovered parts of ourselves we'd buried years ago.